Hey everybody, this is Professor Fairweather. I'm the instructor for Philosophy 1. That's God, Nature, and Human Nature, Las Positas College, fall 2016. Welcome to Philosophy 1. Of course, our class is online, the DE section. So in particular, for that reason, I'd like to talk through a couple points on the syllabus and give you a sense of what the assignments for the class are going to be like, give you a sense of what some of the readings are going to be like, and I think should be helpful to have a little audio introduction to all that. So all of this is stuff that's on the syllabus and that's on Blackboard. I'm just taking the parts of it that seem particularly important to have a little discussion of. So I'll just start with the basic stuff here. As you can see here, instructor April Fairweather. I did my PhD from UC Santa Barbara, that's in philosophy. I got my MA and PhD there. I got my BA in philosophy from UCLA, so it's been philosophy all the way through for me. My background generally is in what you would call metaphysics and epistemology in the analytic tradition. It's mostly more Western, kind of logic-centered philosophy. I have acquired some aptitude in teaching Eastern philosophy and think it's very interesting and important, but most of my training is in, I guess, fairly traditional analytic philosophy, metaphysics, and epistemology. In particular, my research is focused on what's called virtue epistemology, not virtual epistemology, but virtue as in virtues and vices, virtue epistemology. So that's enough about me, but just a little background. My office hours, since we're doing this remotely, I just do this through email, and that's the best email contact there. As you might guess, email traffic, so to speak, can be pretty heavy in online courses. So let me say up front, if you don't hear back from me within a day or at most two, by all means write back. It's not a bother to me. It's helpful, actually. And I try to get back immediately to everything I can, or at least within a couple hours or a day. But sometimes the traffic in email gets heavy, and sometimes things can fall through the cracks. So by all means, write back, and I'll appreciate it if you just send me a little reminder. Again, I try to get back to everything ASAP, but just kind of troubleshooting there. So that's the basic stuff there. I don't use the internal Blackboard messages thing. It's much easier to do it on email. Okay, so let's take a look at the texts for the class. We've got 3 required textbooks. They're all pretty cheap. Some of the formatting was kind of lost from the Word document on here, but we've got the first thing that we're going to hunker down on is going to be 5 dialogues by Plato. We will actually have a very short little peek at the introduction of the examined life by Robert Nozick, but for really the next 3 weeks, we're going to be going over 3 dialogues of Plato's in the book called Five Dialogues. This is a good introduction to one of the main traditions in philosophy, ancient Greek philosophy. So we're really looking at not the first ancient Greek philosopher, but I guess you could say the figurehead, the most kind of significant figure historically in Plato. And we'll see there's a whole range of topics that come up in the different dialogues. We're going to read the Euthyphro, we're going to read the Apology, which is like the trial and sentencing of Socrates, kind of exciting, really happened, so we think. And then a long dialogue on the immortality of the soul, called the Phaedo, and that will wrap up our Plato. So as you'll see on the study guide, there are a number of study guide questions for each of these dialogues, and there's a little audio of me going over those study guide questions. So between reading first, I would suggest, then kind of going through the audio, trying to answer those questions as best as you can, is probably a good way to go for all of the readings. Really best, I would think, if you really want to get the material, is read it on your own, go back and look at the study guide questions, see how many of those study guide questions you can answer, then perhaps listen to the audio and see if you can answer the others. And really, if you really want to get it, go back and read it again. That's kind of putting it all together. So that's really how most reading in philosophy goes. There's a saying that philosophy is not read, but rather reread. And that's true even for me. I've been doing this for like 20 something years. And philosophy is just complex, dense, often very hard to follow, really just to understand what is actually being said. So, really, the main accomplishment for most of the readings is to really just understand what the arguments are at a fairly detailed level. So, we also will then kind of analyze them and evaluate them, but don't feel ashamed by any means if you go through the reading kind of like you would other things and you're not finding that you're quite getting it. That's the pretty much the universal experience. So um, that's true for most of the readings that we'll do. Okay, so Plato is going to give us a little introduction to ancient Greek philosophy. We then will jump ahead, 1,600 years, something like that, no, about 2,000 years, to Rene Descartes. He is considered the founder of modern philosophy. So here we've got the kind of figurehead of a different era, kind of area within philosophy called modern philosophy, by which we don't mean contemporary now, more distinguished from the Middle Ages and ancient philosophy. Those are the kind of three main eras that we break the history of philosophy down into. And of course, there is contemporary philosophy. So Descartes is an amazing figure. He's just as amazing as Plato. He's had an amazing impact on the intellectual life and really just the historical development of Western society. He's a scientist, mathematician, and of course, philosopher. We're going to look at really just a snapshot of his very famous book called Meditations on First Philosophy. This really revolutionized philosophy. It's a tiny little book, but it's quite dense. And we'll go through Meditations 1, 2, and 6. I'm going to kind of skip some of the mid part, but here we'll look at a lot of pretty influential passages on the nature of knowledge, skepticism, justification, certainty, and by the end, the nature of the mind and the body, and specifically the relationship between these two things. I say two things because some people will say there's just one. There's the mind body, there's not the mind and this other thing, the body, or vice versa. So that's what we call mind body dualism. That's just a sample of one of the kind of key Cartesian debates that is still very much with us. People still talk about knowledge and skepticism. That's still very much with us. So a lot of contemporary philosophers are still doing in one form or another what Descartes was doing there about 400 years ago. So it's changed, but you might say it's the continuation of the same basic project. Um, and that's kind of another thing about philosophy, obviously. We continue to pursue the same questions and issues for a long time. And you might either think that, wow, there must not be any progress in what these philosophers do because they're kind of doing the same thing for a long time. There might be something to that, but also it might be because of the kind of questions that we ask. They may not admit of easy or quick, obvious answers because they probe pretty deep. They probe to the foundations of most of the things we take for granted when we give answers to other questions. So at some point, obviously, we have to do that. And in philosophy, we don't. So that's Descartes. Should find him pretty interesting. Last, we've got The Examined Life by Robert Nozick. It's a more contemporary and more kind of applicable to life text. Pretty nice. I think most people find this pretty interesting. It's kind of a nice break from the traditional philosophy, which quite often can be very removed from the concerns of real life. But Nozick gets right into the stuff of life, you might call it, love, emotions, happiness, value and meaning, and I think he does a very nice job of presenting a neutral theoretical structure about each of those topics that the reader can kind of negotiate their way through, But at the same time, he does a pretty nice job of kind of leaving that open for you to develop your own views by going through this theoretical structure and presenting what he takes to be the most plausible, or at least his most plausible, way of addressing the nature of emotion, the nature of love, nature of happiness. So I think that should be a pretty valuable and it's also more accessible book. We'll do that towards the end. So those are the three texts there. It's a little background. Okay, this is important. This is kind of the nuts and bolts for the class. I've got three different assignment types here, and we'll do a couple to a few of each. There might be some variation in how many discussions or quizzes we've got, kind of just depending on the flow of the semester. It wouldn't vary more than one, but if we do end up not doing, let's say, like a final discussion or quiz, then I'll make that announcement. Pretty sure we'll end up with 4 quizzes and 4 discussions, but that will be adjusted to course point total will be adjusted accordingly. So, all right, so let me say a little bit here about each assignment type, and that'll probably wrap it up. So we've got 2 exams. That's going to be a midterm exam and a final exam. There'll be 100 points each. As you can see here, there's a short answer and essay question component. So actually, yes, I should rather say multiple choice. I'm looking at that now. I guess that's short answer, like letter A, letter B, that's our short answer. But I'll have to go back and fix that up, but that should say multiple choice and essay questions. These are going to be taken from the study guide. That's available to you now on Blackboard. That's your main, most helpful resource for the class. I mean, there are discussion assignments that don't require the study guide, but both the quizzes and the exam multiple choice part and essay part, all that's going to be kind of linked to the study guide. So definitely go for that. So basically, the exam, I'm going to take like about 25 multiple choice questions from the study guide. I take those from the study guide questions, so it'll be some subset of those. And I select, actually I give you the full range of essay topics that's listed on the study guide now. And basically I let you choose which of those you want to do. I don't pare those down to like select from 3. So basically you can start, thinking whenever you want to about which of those essays seems to be the one you can do the best job on. As you go through Plato and Descartes, maybe have in the back of your mind, like, peek at the essay topics a couple times, like, which of these could I see myself being most interested in, being most analytical and rigorous in addressing, and maybe how which I could have the most fun and find the most fulfilling. But you'll have those to choose from. So that's going to be taken on Blackboard. It'll be posted in course materials, and you click on it and you answer the multiple choice stuff like kind of normal. And for the essay, you should type up your essay before taking the exam, and then there's an essay question. It's got a blank. Rather than typing it in on the spot, I would definitely recommend just copying and pasting it from something you've already typed up, so that way no work will get lost. So yeah, then you'll just take that online. We've got the multiple choice from the study guide, an essay question. I can say a little bit more about the nature of the essays as we get closer, but really the whole way through, there's a kind of common perspective that I would be looking for people to take in their written work. And it's kind of hard to pin down. I mean, it's philosophical, but what does that mean? You're kind of going to be learning as we go what that means. The one, maybe the most helpful, would be kind of like detached, analytical, dry, logical, just kind of framing the logic of the arguments and evaluating how rationally persuasive those arguments are. That's pretty much the bread and butter of addressing really any passage philosophically. What's the argument here? Can I kind of reconstruct the line of reasoning? The more you can like lay out the step-by-step reasoning of Descartes or Plato or whoever, and really show which assumptions are involved, which premises, how the reasoning moves from one to another, and how the whole argument culminates in some rational attempt to rationally persuade you of the conclusion. And then evaluating how well that seemed to go. So it can become a very complicated project to frame and evaluate an argument in a philosophical passage or book, but it's also something that comes naturally to us, and we kind of naturally do that when we persuade or seek to understand each other. So we're doing something new, but we're also drawing something on something that's a kind of a natural capacity that we've got. It's kind of critical thinking, logical thinking. So that's, I guess, overall the main kind of like how to approach the writing and the reading is to look for the arguments and see how persuasive they are. Okay, so discussions. These tend to be a little bit more open-ended than, let's say, the essay questions, and less specific maybe than the multiple choice questions. The first one I've got is really kind of an opportunity to kind of explore, and you'll do some inevitably some like pretty close philosophical thinking, but there's a number of different topics, and they kind of like might bring you all over the place. So that's not like a single book. These are going to be kind of more like independent exercises in philosophical analysis that might be tangential to the course readings, like the main ones. In part, that's intentional because you just get access to more stuff, more material, different ideas, and that's better. Sometimes they'll be a little bit related, but I don't really see that as essential that it be on something that we're reading in the main text. So these will vary. Really, the main thing I'm looking for you to do there is to participate. Put out like a pretty substantive, legitimate paragraph or two. Kind of varies. A couple paragraphs. Usually, these things don't require more than that. If you want to do more, that's okay. But make them thoughtful. Put some thought into that. And they will all require you to apply to a peer. So that's something that we'll do here. And that I'm also looking for not necessarily correct or incorrect, but thoughtful. That you put some thought into your own post in the discussion board and into your reply to a peer. So that you've given them something kind of educationally useful that they can think about, and someone will reply to you as well. So those are going to vary. Basically, those are mostly participation points rather than correct or incorrect points. But if you don't do it, you can do a more or less thoughtful job, irrespective of whether it's correct or incorrect. So that's really the kind of litmus test of what I look for there. Did this look like just like a little blurb that you didn't really think about and just threw down just to kind of get it over with? Or is it clear that you at least spent some time putting some analytical thought into the post? And it's really what I look for there. So these could be easy getting points, but you got to do at least a thoughtful submission and reply. Okay, finally, we've got quizzes. I'm pretty sure there's going to be 4 of these. There'll be 10 points each, and these are for like correct or incorrect, as opposed to say the discussions. These are going to be 10 points each, 10 questions, multiple choice. There's 30-minute time limit on these, which is pretty generous. So just 10 questions, and you'll already have the full range of questions available to you in the study guide. So I'll take 10 of those on whatever quiz from, let's say, Plato. We're going to have a quiz on Plato, we're going to have a quiz on Descartes, and we're going to have 2 quizzes on Nozick. So I'll look at all the Plato questions. I'll take 10 of those to make a quiz of, and you see there's plenty more than 10 questions on the Plato readings, but I'll pare that down to 10, and you'll just open up a quiz. It'll be pure multiple choice. This is really just to see that you're keeping up with understanding the main points of the readings as we go through them. So yeah, I guess you could call those objective. There should be pretty straightforward answers to them. It's not really, I pick stuff that's not too open to interpretation. So that's about it. We've got those 3 things in our course. I'm Professor Fairweather. Those are the texts. All right, we're getting started. So nothing is due until I think it's the 30th or 31st. Take a look at the discussion board. That's our first thing due. Then we'll start picking it up a little bit. You'll have a quiz not too long after that. The main thing to do right now is to get started reading the three Platonic dialogues. That and go check out the discussion assignment. Could possibly even be a fun one. Hope it is. And that should get us going. Okay, so hopefully this was a helpful little introduction.